What's up? We are just waiting for some people to join in here. Give it just a few minutes and we'll get started. Welcome to this webinar. Today we're going to be talking about new hire onboarding. Regardless of where you're at, whether you're an HR person, whether you're an office manager, whether you're an employer or a boss or manager, whatever the case may be. This is my first run through of this new kind of training of how to set up a new hire. I call it talent activation engine for a company. And so we're going to give a few minutes for other people to sign in. As people are signing in, go ahead and let's make sure that the chat's working. Hop into the chat, tell me where you're from and what your current job title is. So just hop over into the chat and throw in there. You should be able to, let's make sure that you set it to everyone. And go ahead and throw into the chat. Just tell me where you're coming from and what your job title is. Just a little bit about what you do for work, who you work for, anything like that would be great. Throw it into the chat and we're going to get started in just about 2 minutes here. Now, clearly, if you're watching this on the recording, you're not able to throw that into the chat. But we're still glad to have you here. We're going to get started in just 1 second. Just making sure all of our settings are good to go here. All right, try it again. Sorry, you guys. If it didn't let you chat, click on chat and throw in there where you're from and what your current job title is. See if it works now. I hope it's working. Got a good little handful of people on here. Hopefully somebody, and make sure that, there we go. Perfect. Thanks for coming, Stephanie. We got at least one HR person here, so that's awesome. So today we're going to take a little bit different approach. People can throw into the chat if you have any questions as we're going. But I'm going to unpack for you how I go about doing new hire onboarding, a little bit of my backstory, where I came from. I'm going to outline the entire process and strategy that I go through. Clearly, we're not going to cover every little thing today. Most likely when we get done, I'm going to look for you to say, hey, I love this. I would like more knowledge about how to do it, specifically training on how to do it, or hey, that you're up in the night. There's no way I'm going to do this. There you go. So we're going to jump right in here. And if you don't know who I am, I'll introduce myself in a second here, but my name's Ryan Kohler or Ryan K, depending on how you know me. I own part of a company called Applicant Pro for the last 17 years. I've been building hiring software that's now used by over 10,000 companies. Use my applicant tracking system to manage all of their hiring. Now I've stepped aside from that company and now I work for a company called Refer, where I do the opposite. I help job seekers find jobs and improve how they show up at work and improve their, not just their ability to get a job, but also to do good at that job. And that's part of this kind of back and forth between helping employers and helping job seekers is really where I like to live. And that's why I created this webinar today, where I train job seekers in how to do better at their jobs, which ends up helping employers. But for the last, almost 2 decades, I've lived, eat, breathe, sleep, hiring. Everything that has to do with hiring and recruiting. And today we're going to talk about kind of what you do once you hire somebody. Now, clearly, if your employer is struggling, if you're watching this and you're struggling to attract applicants, I've got a different webinar on that. Hit me up, Ryan at Refer.io, RYN at Refer.io. More than happy to send you the training on how to attract applicants. But today we're going to talk about what do you do with an applicant once you hire them? Because it's just as important to be prepared. And most employers, especially small employers, are not very prepared with what they do once they hire somebody. I was talking to a couple of my hiring consultants yesterday, and they said a lot of the feedback they're getting right now is even if you offer somebody a job and they accept it, they don't show up to work, or they don't even make it through the first 30 or 60 or 90 days before maybe they get a different job offer. Maybe they aren't engaged, whatever the case may be. The simple fact of the matter is hiring is hard, but also retaining employees is just as difficult. And the fact is, part of that reason is because this right here, 96% of employees are looking for a new job in 2023. So even if your company is not growing, like my previous company, Applicant Pro, I'm going to show you our growth rate. We're growing at like 30, 40% year over year over year. So we've doubled in size in like every 2 to 3 years. We double the size of our team. We double the size of our revenue, which means we're constantly hiring. But unfortunately, even if you're not growing as an employer in the US right now, most likely you're still going to be hiring just to replace the people who are leaving. Again, 96% of employees are looking for a new job in 2023. Now, if you listen to the news or read the news or whatever, you most likely have heard about all these different layoffs in the tech world, in the tech sector, big companies doing layoffs. And a lot of employers might say, oh man, that means it should be getting easier to hire. But the simple fact of the matter is it's not. There's what I call a talent gap. Now, this is data from the Federal Reserve, and it basically is showing these two lines. That number one shows the job openings. That's this. Oh, I gotta get my pencil here. That's this top line right here. The number of job openings versus the number of unemployed people. If you think about before COVID, there was what we all called the talent shortage. Everybody was complaining about a shortage of talent. And what that simply means is that there are more openings than there are available people. So that doesn't mean that all jobs that are open are filled by unemployed people. It just means that the people have to come from somewhere. If you, as an employer, hire from your competitor, then they have to hire from their competitor. And at some point, somebody has to hire an unemployed person, or the job sits open. This right here was causing a lot of complaints. But if you look at what happened now clearly during the COVID period, where we had all of a sudden a bunch of actual layoffs, like real massive unemployment rate went up, everything changed. But as we reopen and you look at even today, even with the layoffs that have been happening recently, we still are somewhere between 2 times to 3 times worse off in that talent gap than before COVID. This right here is the problem. It's the reason why employers struggle to hire. It's also the reason why employers struggle to keep their people around, right? That is how it works, is when there's a gap of talent, when supply and demand, think about it like the housing industry, when there's more demand for employees than there are employees available, this gap is created and employers get more and more competitive to pull talent away from their competitors, to pull them away from different industries, et cetera. And this simply isn't going to change, at least in the near future. Now, there are a lot of changes coming, whether it's AI and automation and technology and et cetera, that could change and disrupt different markets and different segments. But the simple fact of the matter is most of the employers I talk to are still struggling to attract good talent. But even if you can attract them, like a lot of employers feel like they're giving up. They're just like, it's pointless. We can't. In fact, I hear especially a lot of small business owners where they don't feel like people want to work these days, where they feel like the government's paying people not to work. None of those are actually true. Now, they may have examples of somebody who doesn't want to work, or kids these days who don't want to work, or the government paying certain people not to work. But the fact of the matter is, that's not the reason why employers are struggling. And the key that they've got to keep in mind is that there is hope, but they've got to change their approach. So let me tell you a little bit about my story at Applicant Pro. So for the last 18 years, I started a company with one part-time mom 18 years ago as a programmer. They are now right around 280 employees. Just think about that growth rate. I started with 40 grand that I had. Actually, I was paying my work from home part-time mom programmer out of my paycheck while we built Applicant Pro in the first few years. We've now done over $100 million in revenue without any funding. So we're what you would call an underdog. We compete against big, giant public companies, people with lots more money than I have, growing like a rocket ship. over the last 16, 17 years. And one of the reasons I could grow like that was I figured out how to attract talent. This is my own data on applicants per job. Over the last, this went to 2021. In 2022, this actually continued to increase. As of right now, Applicant Pro gets something like 500 applicants per job opening for our own internal jobs. And today I'm going to unpack why we get that many applicants. And it's not just about being good at recruiting. It's a whole lot about what happens after we hire somebody. And the reason is this right here. We currently get more than 20 employee referrals per hire. And just let that sink in for a minute. I'm not just rejecting 500 applicants every time I hire somebody. I'm actually rejecting 20 employee referrals. My average client gets somewhere around 3 to 4 employee referrals per hire. I'm getting 20. And this right here, this measurement, the idea that I'm getting so many applicants who are referred to me from my employees says this isn't just about being good at recruiting. It's not just that I have great job ads. It's not that it's that I have a great place to work. And so I'm going to explain what that means. The fact is, if you're any company, you have to build a talent engine in order to grow. If you're looking to grow, or I would say even just looking to maintain your headcount right now, you have got to figure out how to build a talent engine. This talent engine, I can tell you, is the number one asset at Applicant Pro, the number one reason that we were on the Inc. 5000 list for 10 years in a row. It's this talent engine right here. No matter how many good ideas I have, no matter how many cool products and software we build, no matter how good I am at marketing, if I don't have those 280 people doing their jobs and driving the business forward, it stalls or falls apart. And so this right here, you have to build a talent engine. Now, what most employers think is, well, they can recruit. And to be honest, most employers struggle at all of these. So I'll go through the 4 parts of the talent engine. They're kind of sub engines, these cogs. And if you can think about it, if you want to have a powerful talent engine, if one of these isn't working, isn't pulling its weight, then the other one will have to level up to make up for it, or your engine will stall or slow down. So we have 4 main parts. Number 1 is attraction. Can I attract great quality people who want to work for me? That's my number 1 set here is, can I attract great people? That's normally where we start. It's where we invest most of our time and money and energy. Now, attraction is only as good as our ability to take those new hires and get them up to speed. That's what we'll call this. We'll call this up to speed. We want them to become effective and efficient and good at their job. So this is that we have people to pick from who will actually accept our offer. This is once somebody accepts our offer and says they'll work for us, can we actually get them up to speed? Can we get them there pulling their weight? Now, long-term, we want to end up amplifying. This is about performance. Can we turn our new hires after 90 days into top performers? The last one is this advancement, and it's a little bit smaller cog because not everybody can move up. If you think about it, at Applicant Pro, I have a support team of like 20 people, but I only have like 2 managers. And so not every support person can move up through the company. The best way to think about advancement is either you want them to move up, you want them to move over, or if you really care about your employees, you want them to move out to a better opportunity. But what you don't want are employees that just stay stagnant. Because if you're building a growth company, if you're hiring great people don't want to just stay in the same job, doing the same thing, making just a couple % more per year. And if you are an employee and you want to make more money, those are the 3 ways to make more money. It's not just to stay there the longest. If you want to make not just like 3% increases per year, but you instead want to increase your pay by 10 or 20%, or, I've got employees that started with me at $14 an hour who are now making 6 figures. If you want to do that, most likely you're going to have to either move up, meaning become the manager or the team lead. You're going to have to move over, meaning into a position that has more value, such as moving from support into sales, where you're paid more because you generate more value for the company, or moving out to another organization that maybe is bigger, is growing faster, has more opportunities. Those are really your three main options there. Now, today we're going to focus on activation. So if your company is struggling to attract candidates and you don't have very good ones, like I said, hit me up, shoot me an email. I will send you out my attraction webinar, and you can see exactly how I built a talent attraction funnel. But today we're going to talk about how to activate that talent. How do we build a system to systematically take a new hire and turn them into a rock star? That really is the goal. Can I get somebody up to speed and going as quickly and effectively as possible? Now, when it comes to talent, we all kind of think that there's only one way to do it. And the reason why most employers think there's one way to do it is because they're copying each other. They assume, for instance, let's say that you were competing with Google. You assume that if you just do what Google does, let's say that you're this little startup, like say OpenAI, which is the new startup that's going head to head with Google, you assume that you can just do what they're doing and that it will work. But the fact of the matter is they have way more money than you will ever have. They have a better brand, they have a bigger team, they have better recognition. There's little to no chance that if you use their strategy, it will work when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to retention, when it comes to anything else like that. The fact is, most organizations, you have three options. So the first one is buy. This is what big dogs do. So if you are the big dog employer, whether you're Google or Wells Fargo or you name it, they have the most money, they have the biggest team, they have the best brand recognition, they buy talent. They're buying these people right here, people with massive amounts of experience and knowledge who've already done it before. And while that would be great for a small employer to have that same person, the fact is you can't afford them. You most likely can't pay them enough to pull them away from a big company. You most likely don't have enough money to advertise to attract them. You most likely don't have the team and the process to pull them in or the credibility. So that's option one, is to buy. The second option is to hope. And I'm afraid that this is what most employers, especially small employers, are doing. They act like the big dog, only with less money, and then they wonder why it doesn't work. They hope. Where I spent most of my time over the last 20 years is in growing my own talent. So instead of trying to hire people at this stage right here as full-grown plants, I would hire them here and focus on growing them internally. It is more work. It takes more creativity. It takes building systems and organizations, is what I'm going to talk about, of how you identify somebody here, how you activate them to get them to here, how you amplify it to get them to here. Now, a lot of employers will say, well, that sucks. We're just training people and they're going to leave us, which could be true, but it's worse if you don't train them at all. One of the biggest things that I've found by running this process is along the way, I build up loyalty. If I have a great place to work, if I have hired people who other people wouldn't hire, for me, it was a lot of part-time moms. If I hire underdogs, if I hire people who didn't finish college, didn't go to the perfect college, want part-time work, anything like that, this concept, or what I'm doing by really making sure that I'm identifying diamonds in the rough, activating them and amplifying their abilities, I end up keeping way more than I lose because they become loyal to my organization. It also means that they refer people back. And that's where all those employee referrals are coming from, is the fact that I'm growing my talent. Give you an idea of what this looks like. If I look at Applicant Pro right now has 280 employees, which is a decent sized company. But if I look at my core, say 50 employees, okay, the first 50 people I hired, why are they so important? Well, they become the leaders of the organization. This core 50 are managers and leaders within my organization. Less than 5% of them had ever done the job they're doing before they came to work for me. Most of them didn't have experience in a tech company, didn't have experience in a SaaS company. My salespeople had never sold before. Even when they came to me, they were coming into jobs and I was growing them up. less than 5%. That's a big deal. That's not what you'd find at a bigger company. And this means it's a lot of work to decide to do this, but hope will not make it happen. So what does this actually look like? This is what I call, the talent activation roadmap. These are the steps you have to take in order to build a system to activate great talent. It's not something that just happens on its own. It's not something that can be left up to the new hire, although some new hires will figure it out. That's hope. Our goal is not to hope. It's to actually systematize and make it happen. So it comes down to these 4 main steps, and this is what we're going to cover today in this webinar. Number 1 is having a great strategy. It means setting the goal and the vision for what you're trying to accomplish. It's not trying not to lose, it's trying to win. It's not just hoping that people stick around. It's not just focused on compliance and making sure their new hire paperwork is there. It's not about doing the minimum. It's about actually figuring out what you can do to turn this into a superpower, we call it. Oh man, I can't spell or write today. Sorry. Super power, right? At Applicant Pro, that was one of our secrets. Our secret sauce was that we turn attracting, activating, amplifying, and advancing talent into our superpower. We didn't use money, we used creativity, we used the willingness to just push forward, but that was our strategy. Talent engine would become our superpower. Number 2 is substance. This has to do with content, whether we're creating the content, the training, the videos, the playbooks, whether we're buying them or borrowing them or pulling them from a mentor or some other place or training. We have to have great content to use to train our employees. And more importantly, this content can't be something that we do, that we start over again each time, that we're doing one-to-one, right? This content needs to be something that is done one-to-many, meaning in a group session, or more importantly, that is done automated, that is recorded, that can be scaled. The next part is system. Just because you've nailed down the strategy and you have good content, it needs to be systematized. It needs to be step by step by step that drives it forward, that makes sure that every new hire goes into the same system, that they walk through the parts, that they run, that they walk through the flow, that if a manager's busy or a manager leaves, it doesn't all go away, that we're not expecting them to figure it out on their own, but there is a system for it that we run through. And the final one is success. And that means, do we measure it? Do we measure if it's working? Do we adjust it? Do we improve it? Right? Because if you don't measure it and track it, then you just forget about it. And if this is that important to you, then it's something we talk about, we measure, and we focus on and improve. So I'm going to walk through each of these steps. And the first part is a comprehensive strategy. So this is where most employers get it wrong. Their number 1 focus is compliance because they don't want to get in trouble. What does compliance mean? It means paperwork. That means they've collected the W-2 and the I-9 or W-4 and the I-9. They've collected your direct deposit forms. They've got your benefits enrollment. Maybe they have an employee handbook that they put together and they have you sign that you got it. And when they have checked off all of these parts, they say onboarding is done. I actually know this is the focus because I own an onboarding company where we build new hire paperwork. And when I say onboarding, most employers think of compliance. We need all this paperwork. We need people to have checked it off. We need them to have signed it because it's the law. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It is one part of a comprehensive strategy. Now, the second part is performance. What most employers then do is they look at the failure. So how do we measure this? It would be they measure turnover or what we might call fail rates. Basically, it's did people make it the 90 days and are they any good? Or did we fire them or did they quit, right? We're measuring failure. There's nothing wrong with measuring failure. It is something but it's not the same as measuring success. You see, if you're measuring failure, you're just trying to limit the failure instead of trying to maximize the success. This is saying, get us less of the worst people, not get us more of the great people. Now, why is this so important? Well, quite simply, most people, when these failure numbers are here, they blame recruiting. So if you're hiring people and they don't last 90 days or they're not very good, most employers will say, well, the applicants aren't very good, or we're not doing a very good job of interviewing and hiring them. And some of that may be true, but that's assuming that the employee hiring a great person is enough to grow your own talent. The fact of the matter is, while you may get away with 10%, in fact, it's the 80-20 rule. So let's just go with that. 20% of hires will figure it out, regardless of how bad you are at helping them get good. 20%. But that means 80% of people are going to be lost. Now, not all of these 80% are good. Potentially 40% are bad hires that you should get rid of or you should figure out. But this leaves us right here, this 40% of potential. And this is what today is all about. This 40% right here, the people that could become great at their job if only you created a system for it. Now, what is it that we need to have a system for? Well, that brings us up here. Do we have a systematic way to get them the know-how they need to do the job? That is knowledge, that is training, that is the right tools and how to use those tools and experience using them, the context about what it's all about. And number 4, can we create an experience or an environment where they can grow? Now, back to my analogy right here of grow by or hope. I want you to think about our goal is to grow, right? So our goal of this is, can we grow talent? And let's stick with that analogy of growing. I grew up on a farm. My mom had a huge garden. We raised dairy cows. I hauled hay all summer long. And growing is not a one-time thing. Now, maybe hunting is going out and finding something that somebody else grew. And gathering is a good way to think about it, growing versus gathering. When you're gathering food, you go out in the forest and you hope that there's just wild food growing there that you can grab, like berries. Now, while that may be easier because you didn't have to do all the work, it's also not very dependable because you didn't make a system for it. Farming or growing is more dependable. We plant the seeds, we nourish the seeds, we weed the rows, we fertilize them, we make sure they get water and sunlight, and we can predict. I know growing up every summer, at the end of the summer, I could predict that we were going to have food from the garden because we're following a systematic approach to growing food. If I'd instead just gone out and randomly looked for berries in the wilderness, some years I would have done well, and some years I would have starved because it was out of my control. And that's the best analogy for you to think about with your boss, with your employer, with your company, is that most employers are not growing talent like it's a system. They are hoping they'll be able to gather talent that's out there in the world that either grew itself or somebody else created it. That isn't I'm not saying that's wrong to do. I'm saying it's not dependable. You can't depend on it. And if you're saying that as an organization, in order to survive, we're going to have to grow our team size, both our size and quality. I don't want to leave that up to chance. I don't want to leave it up to hope. I'm going to have to actually spend some time and build the system so that I know I can depend on it. And that's what it comes down here. Can I get them the know-how they need? Yes, I want to be compliant. Check the box. Number 2, yes, I want to track performance, but I also want to track this right here, the success. I want to be as focused on success as I am on failure. Number 3, I need to make sure that I systematically get them the knowledge, the skills, the experience using it to be able to be good at their job, the processes, that they know how we do things. And then finally, I have to make sure I have an environment that is good for growing crops, that's good for growing talent. I've got a fertile ground to plant them in where they're most likely to grow. That means that it's a good experience. It means that they believe in themselves, that it builds their confidence, doesn't harm it, that they have good mentors and leaders and coworkers, that there's this over here would be culture and values, right? And the overall environment you're creating, that you have good dirt. My mom, bless her heart, she's gone now, but I grew up on this farm, and the garden plot we had was the size of the average person's lot that their house is on. But that ground, the dirt was so black and so rich with nutrients because for years and years and years, a garden had been grown there where they kept fertilizing it and mulching it and tilling it and putting more and more fertilizer onto it. Their ground, you could literally grow anything in it because they'd created fertile ground to plant the seeds in. And each year it was getting better and better. So this is the first part. We have to have a comprehensive strategy. It's not about just playing not to lose. It's about playing to win. It's not just about being compliant. It's about, and it's not just about measuring, please don't fail. It's about actually creating a systematized way where people learn and become good at what they need to, where they have fertile ground to plant them in, where they grow and want to grow, and where we measure success. And that is our goal, focusing on successful hires. That's step number one. So step number two, we have to get good content. And this is probably one of the hardest parts of building an amazing talent activation system is creating content or getting content. In fact, content right here is kind of my superpower. Content is the hardest thing for companies to do, period. If I was talking about marketing today, I'd be telling that most companies aren't good at creating content. They shortchange it. They don't spend time doing it. So I want to talk about the type of content you need. Think about the last time that you were trained to do a job. Think about the last new job you got. In fact, you're welcome to chime. Oh man, I hit the wrong button. Hang on. There we go. Maybe you can hop in the chat. I know Andrea and Stephanie are here. Think about the last new job you got. What were you trained on in that first 30 to 60 to 90 days? Most likely it was right here. This is the primary focus of most employer training programs, is the role. And this is the reason for it. You have a manager, right, who has these people that report to them. And when they lose somebody or they have an opening filled up, these three here are having to pick up the slack because you had this hole to fill. And this is where your new hire goes into. Now, in the meantime, the manager is also picking up the slack. So you end up with this group right here that are doing all this extra work to make up for the fact that you have an empty seat. Because of that, on the very first day that somebody works, we want to get them up to speed in that role. We try to train them on, it's like a crash course. In fact, we dump it on them like it's a fire hose. And it's mostly focused on how to do the job they were hired for. And that makes a lot of sense because they were hired to do that job. But there's a problem. Depending on this might work really well for somebody who's done it in the past. So again, if you bought the talent, if you hired somebody who'd already done this job before at one of your competitors, then just showing them how to do the role might work great. The problem is, if you're actually growing talent, when you're growing talent, it means you're hiring somebody who either hasn't been in your industry, hasn't worked with the same customers you work with, hasn't done the role before. They haven't worked for a company like yours. They are like a clean slate to paint on whatever you will. But there's a problem here, and that is that these three parts over here give us what we call context or backstory. It's kind of like, imagine the best way I can think about it is if you've ever moved to a new school when you were growing up partway through the year. Just think about this for a minute. You move, you pick up, you land in this new school halfway through the year. Everybody there knows their teacher. They know what the teachers are like. They know all the other kids in school. They know what to expect. They know where lunch is at. They know where recess is at. They know the rules and the colors and the song and all that kind of stuff. And you show up all of a sudden and you utterly lack context. Now, here's what the problem is of lacking context. Just think about, put yourself in the position of that kid who just showed up in a brand new school, has no friends, doesn't know anybody there, is jumping in partway through the year, the likelihood of them being confident is very low. In fact, what they're most likely to be is anxious, extremely anxious, because they don't know what they don't know. And that really is the core problem when it comes to creating great content. Is you have to start with the idea or the goal that our goal is to check all of these boxes off. We want to be right here in the middle, right? Long term, we want to have them understand the company, meaning our origin story, where we came from, how we started. We want them to understand the industry. Hey, we're in the software world, specifically in the hiring software. Here's the different companies in this space. Here's the different offerings. We want them to understand our customer, who we help, why we help them, what we help them with. And then we want them to understand their role. If we just teach them their role without understanding the industry, the company, and the customer, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. The reason they're making the mistakes is they don't know any better. More importantly, it's going to take them longer to get up to speed, if you look at it this way, than if we'd started off by giving them that context up front. So that's kind of the problem with it, is we aren't creating great content. And the reason we aren't is, going back to this manager, the people who know it are not great at creating content or don't have the time to. You see over here, you might have the HR person, but the HR person doesn't know how to do this job. They aren't a programmer. They're not a salesperson. They're not whatever. So even if HR had time, which most of them don't, or if you're an office manager, same thing, you don't have time to go come up with the content because either you don't have the time or you don't have the knowledge. The people who have the knowledge right here don't have the time. And so we just keep recreating the wheel. We just keep complaining and starting from scratch each time. At some point, if you want to grow the company, then you have to grow the ability to create great content and activate these people. So this was part number 2. Part number 3 is, when you have the content, it has to be a system. It has to be something where when you actually hire somebody, that they walk step by step through the first 14 days, the first 30 days, the first 60 days, and the first 90 days, that gets them right here to some measurement of success. Not just that they stuck around, but they're actually good at their job. And along the way here, there's a whole lot of stuff for them to learn. Once again, the manager and the rest of the team are going to struggle to help them, because this person right here is going to have a whole lot of questions, but they're not going to want to look stupid by asking. They're not going to want to disrupt the manager by asking. The manager is going to feel like, hey, I told you all that in the first 14 days, even though there's no way they remember it all. And so it's going to create this problem, this gap of knowledge. And that's probably the best way to think about it. Over here, these people know how to do it, and this person doesn't. But those group over there don't have the time, and this individual is motivated not to ask the right questions, or not to ask questions at all, because they feel like they're disrupting everybody. And so crossing this chasm from I don't know to I know is a lot of work. It's not easy, but leaving that up, again, 20% of people will cross it on their own, but 80% will either not cross it because they never will, because they're not a good fit, or don't have the potential, or they have the potential, but they won't cross it because there's just not a good system in place. So part number 2 was content. Part number 3 is systematize. What does this mean? Well, a lot of people think it might mean an LMS, learning management system. That is a starting point that could work. It also means doing it via email, like one email at a time for 90 days. It could mean that you do live training. Could mean that you have quizzes and some type of a feedback loop. Some way for them to ask questions like an FAQ, or to get common answer questions. It could be playbooks. Now, if I think about this, playbooks and processes, think about where you work today. If you're lucky, there's some type of live training that happens in the first 1 to 14 days. Most organizations at least have some type of training. It's most likely not very organized. It most likely isn't something that can be repeated or scaled. it most likely is something that is rushed. It's rushed because the person doing it doesn't have the time, not because the person receiving it doesn't need it. Let me restate that. Most live training is rushed because the person performing the training is too busy and doesn't have the time. But that doesn't mean that the new hire doesn't need them to take the time to teach them. You might have an LMS, meaning this is learning management system, this equals video. But most likely the rest of this stuff, unless you work for a really big company, doesn't exist. If you think about what it takes to learn something, think about going to school. Your teacher's entire job at school is just to teach you. They don't have a side job that they're also doing. But when it comes to the way employers work, your manager's full-time job is not to train you. It's not to train the team or to train the new hires. Definitely you need, so I will email this to you for sure. And so this is where the problem set is. If we don't create a system for it that will scale, then it's never going to be repeated and it's just going to be left up to chance. And so we have to create a system so that while yes, it takes a lot of work up front, what we want to look like is this, that our hire numbers are going up like this, the number of people going through it, but the work looks more like this. This is the work hours, right? If you think about, if you are doing this as one-off training, then your workload looks just like this. You have to do the same work. As you hire more people, you have to do more work. And this means that you're never ending constantly training. And forget about it. If turnover goes up, if your turnover goes up, then your workload is going to go up even more. If you can't keep people around, then you're going to be doing even more work. The only way to get to this point, which is where we want to get, is to systematize it, to make sure that while we created the content the first time, that the next time we have it recorded, that we can use video for some of it, that we outlined it, that we turned it into something that can happen on its own, that we don't forget about it, that when we get busy, like it's not a, well, I got unlucky because I got hired when everybody was busy. And so I didn't get the same training as everybody else because we didn't have the time. See, that right there is the problem set. If it's not systematized, if it's not repeatable, if it's not scalable, then it falls through the cracks and it just doesn't work the right way. The last part here is measure. How do you measure that was successful? And again, like I said, most people, most employers are measuring failure. What I mean by that is they're measuring turnover or fail rates. How many people didn't make it 90 days? They might have it be voluntary versus involuntary. What that means is, did they quit or did we fire them, right? But again, this is measuring failure. What you measure, you get more of, okay? Now you might be trying to lessen this, but that's just plain not to lose. Instead, we need to be measuring these four main areas. Number one, better. This is the quality. Did the new hires, were they better than the last set of new hires? Was this person, did they end up getting trained with more knowledge and higher quality? Faster. This is in number of days, right? Were they up to speed faster? So at the end of 90 days, were they smarter, but did they get to it faster than everybody else? Cheaper. This has to do with how much it costs us to train them. It could be manager time. It could be coworker time, whatever. And the last one is easier. This really does have to do with the manager. Was it easier on the manager and the team for this person to get up to speed? Was it less distracting? Right? And so that's the way we measure success. We want all four of these to be moving. We want to move this needle on all four of them at the same time. Now, they might not all move in the same ways, but at the end of the day, we're trying to, you might look at it and say, look, we don't want to spend more money, but we're fine spending the money we're spending if only the people were coming out better, it was happening faster and easier, and they were sticking around, right? And so that's how you measure your success. Now, in the last 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about how you actually go about building this engine, and I'll talk through the steps. Because at the end of the day, the number one thing you need is somebody to own it. As an HR person, as an office admin, as an office manager, or for me as the owner, I have to have somebody own building this engine. That means somebody has to believe it's important enough to allocate the time and resources to it. And not resources meaning money, because to be honest, it's not a money problem. It's a time problem for most people. So how do we go about doing this? I've got a 7-step process for how you go about actually building a talent activation engine. Number one is you make an outline. You could think about this like the roadmap. You have to create a map that shows where you're going, why you're going, and what the steps are to get to where you want to go. That's step one. You need to outline it. This is about going through and asking, what does this person need to know in order to be great at the job? Number two, you need to interview. This is really the core thing here is you want to be a journalist. So if you are the office manager, the office admin, an HR person, somebody like that, most likely you don't know what people need to know to be great at the job. Don't try to learn it all. Instead, you want to be the journalist. You want to interview people who know. How do you do this? You get them on Zoom. You ask them a series of questions. If you email me, Ryan@Refer.io, and ask me, I actually have lists of questions that I use. I want to interview people. I'll show you what I'm going to interview them about in a minute here, but I'm going to use Zoom. I'm going to record the interview. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to interview the boss. I'm going to interview the leadership team. I'm then going to interview the manager. I'm going to interview people currently doing the job. I'm going to interview people who were new and just went through training. My goal of my interview is to gather knowledge and content from individuals and record it so I don't have to do it each time. Why is that so powerful? Because these recordings means that we only have to do it once, and then we can reuse that knowledge. The next part is we're going to transfer. This normally means we're going to take video, we're going to turn it into audio, we're going to take audio, we're going to convert it or transcribe it so that we get it into text. The reason why this is so important is because people learn in different ways, and you need a mix of video, audio, and text. Number one. Number two, once you get it into text, it becomes easier to use parts of it and chunk it up, because part of the goal here is to edit this into not just one big training video. We want to turn this one big long training video or a group of them into smaller chunks. I can't spell, don't get me wrong, but yeah, chunks. We want to build it into chunks. We want to eat this knowledge one bite at a time over a 90-day period. What does that mean? Well, you're not going to record 90 days worth of videos. You're going to record 5 or 6 videos per job. You're going to take and break it into smaller chunks, whether they're video chunks or audio chunks or text chunks, and you're going to spread it out. Again, the goal here isn't just to replace the kind of fire hose 14 days or 7 days, whatever that initial training is. There's still some things you can do to video that. I would go and be the journalist to kind of shadow a new hire going through it and videotape all the training. That would give you that first chunk of the fire hose training, but you still need to be able to take and break it up into this 90 days worth of repeating training to get you up to speed. When I have all this content, I now can actually build a system. This means we need some type of a learning management system or video. It could be something as simple as just YouTube. You just load all your videos up to YouTube and make them private. It could be that you're loading the videos into Vimeo. It could be that you're using any number of learning management systems that are out there. We need to actually create an email drip sequence, and we need to create some type of quizzes and an FAQ, some way to look up questions and get answers. The goal is transfer of knowledge. More importantly, and I think that's one of the goals, it's not transfer of knowledge per se. It's transfer of access to knowledge. I want you to think about the difference between those two things for a minute here. We all came, most of us, especially if you're as old as me or older, we came from and went through a school system that was all about memorization. They were there to teach us and memorize it and store it all in my head. It is physically impossible for you to remember everything you need to know. More importantly, it's not necessary anymore. Google has made it so I don't need to remember things. I just need to know how to get access to it and search for it. And that really is the goal, is to move them not just from memorizing everything, but knowing how to access that knowledge and how to get to it and use it. That's actually more powerful. And so when you move from this, and like video training is about memorization, about gaining the knowledge, email is about spreading it out so that we learn it over time. But this stuff right here, frequently asked questions and process documents and checklists, this is about making it so that you don't need to memorize it. You don't need to know it all. You just need to memorize where stuff is at and how to use it. And that really is the goal when you're building this system. Now, once it's there, you need to launch it. I suggest you do this one job role at a time. That's my 2 cents. Pick one department, one role, launch it, get it working. A lot of the content that you need from an industry, customer, and company standpoint, you'll be able to reuse. And so when we look at the knowledge in here, I'll kind of explain, but when we look at, say, this stuff right here, this will be the same for everyone. This will be the same for everyone. This will most likely be the same for everyone. Right now, a lot of your team doesn't learn this stuff if it's not required in their role. So when you do the very first role, you will check all 4 boxes, but each role after that, you then just have to check the role boxes. You'll be able to reuse it. That's the power of starting with just one role first. But then over time, you're going to constantly improve it. So how do we go about doing this? Well, we've got just a few minutes here and I'll talk through it. The first one is outline. And like I said, if you shoot me an email, I actually have documentation on how to do this. You outline. I have a list of questions that I ask about the industry, about the customer, about the company, and about the role. So I have a list of questions. I'm going to gather all this knowledge together. What you're gathering together is who has this knowledge and what are the questions to ask. That's my first part of outlining. Do I have an outline for a role that says, here's the questions I need to ask and who I'm going to ask them to, right? Number 2, I then do interviews. Like I said, this is Zoom that I record. The most powerful role in this setup, and the same in marketing in my companies, is that of what I call business journalist. You are the journalist. It means you don't have to have all the knowledge. You just have to be good at asking questions of people who have the knowledge. We want to do the interview. Now, how do I do this transfer? I actually take Zoom and I send it to, I use Camtasia to split up the video versus the audio. And I use a tool called Otter that takes and turns this into text. I'm going to end up with video clips, audio clips, and plain text. That's the goal of this transfer. Can I take all of this information? I should end up with, on my first roll, maybe somewhere around 5 to 10 hours of content. Yes, it does take that much work, but the next roll, I'll probably only need 1 to 2 hours. And each roll after that, it will take less and less of recording and interviewing to get to the knowledge I need, because we're going to reuse industry, customer knowledge, and company knowledge. Across, you might even put in here department knowledge if there were 5 of them, right? So that kind of is how we gather the knowledge. You would be surprised how easy this is to do if you're just simply willing to have somebody be in charge of it. If you want to add massive value to your organization, whether you're in HR, whether you're an office admin, office manager, somebody's admin assistant, whatever the case may be, being the person who's the journalist who goes through and pulls this knowledge is insanely valuable, because it's a hot potato that nobody wants. Now, once we've done that, we've now gathered all this knowledge and information, video, audio, and text. Now we're going to go to the next step. So what is that knowledge about? Again, these 4 areas, and I have a list of questions to ask. So the company might be about our origin story, our culture, our values, our products, and like our differentiation or our model, right? That's the kind of stuff that people need to know about the company. A lot of that might actually be on your website. It's just if I'm expecting an employee to go out and dig for it, they're not going to find it. Also, what's on your website isn't the behind the scenes story that an employee needs to know. It's the story we're projecting out in the marketplace. Now, over here is the industry. This has to do with, what is our industry? Who are the different players in it? What is the ecosystem like? Who are our competitors? Who are our partners? Who are the different players in the space, right? Players and influencers and that type of stuff. This is about the industry. Once again, each employee could go and try to figure that out on their own. But what I would do is assign the first employee running it right now to go and gather this. The next one is the customer. Who are they? How do we segment them? What are their pains? What is the impact, the negative impact of those pains? What is their goal? What is the positive? We call this a positive future. And what's the strategy or the steps they need to take to get to it? How does our product help solve it? Then you get to the actual role. This is about my department. Who comes before me that I interact with? Who comes after me that I interact with? And what is my actual job here in the middle? I have a list of questions for each of these things. Now think about, who am I going to interview for this? I'm going to maybe interview a customer or a salesperson when it comes to the customer, sales and support. My sales and support people understand the customer, their pains, etc. When it comes to the company, I'm going to talk to the management team or the owner. I want to hear their story, but I only want to hear it once, right? I only need to hear it once. When it comes to the industry, I'm going to go study blogs. I'm going to find associations. A lot of this isn't interviewing. It's just gathering the knowledge together and putting it together about who's who and what's what. Most likely you can pull a lot of this from YouTube. If you just go out, research it, compile it together. And then finally the role, we're going to talk about to three or four different people. We're going to talk about to the manager, interview them. We're going to talk to the current employees doing the job. We're going to talk to the best people and the newest. So these would be people after 90 days, right? Those are the type of people that we're interviewing and asking them questions about, what does it take to do good at this job? What are your goals? What is the role? What are the tools you use? What kind of training did you learn? What do you wish you'd known on the first day? If you could go back in the first 90 days, what do you wish that you'd been told or wish that you learned about? Again, very simple, 30-minute long Zoom things to pull that knowledge, put it together so that you can now take it and edit it out, build it into a step-by-step system to launch. There are some tricks in building this content out that I will teach in future webinars. So if you're interested in going deep into this, I would love to hear your feedback. Shoot me an email to ryan@refer.io. But editing has to do with video editing, audio editing, if you're going to make this like a podcast, converting it to text. And then I use a lot of content writing tools to make this into email content, quiz content, FAQ content, etc. Right? These are the kind of things that I want when I'm creating a training program. When I have that, I can then build the content and build it actually into a blasting system. I use SendFox for this a lot of times. We use Academy of Mine at Applicant Pro. There's lots of different offerings, but the key is I want to drip this out via email, not just put it somewhere that they have to go through on their own. Finally, the launching has to do with getting buy-in and picking one role, even one new hire to run through it, or a group of new hires to run through it, so that you can see exactly how it works and measure the before and after. Because once you measure it, you can then make adjustments and improve things. And so that is the process we go through. Over time, we want to keep perfecting it. We're probably on version 10 of training our support team at Applicant Pro, because we just keep outline it, create it, launch it, see how it goes, and we outline, create it. This would be see how it goes, or measure it, adjust. We have to adjust it because things change, the job changes, the environment changes, the industry changes, our processes change. I wish it was something we could do and it'd be perfect. That is not the goal. The goal is to make progress, to constantly be getting better as you go, not to try to make it perfect on the first time. So that is the end of our presentation today. I hope that this was valuable for you. Again, you can shoot me an email, Ryan@Refer.io. Shoot me an email to Ryan@Refer.io. I would love to hear your feedback, your questions, anything you have. If you want access to the recording, if you want access to this presentation, and also I'm putting together my list of interview questions that I use, just shoot me an email. Be more than happy to send it over to you. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching this webinar today. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.